My father stared straight at me and said I was the biggest mistake he had ever made. He told me to take my pregnancy and leave his house. He gave me 1 hour to pack up 21 years of my life into whatever I could carry. My mother did nothing. She sat at the dinner table, quietly staring at her mashed potatoes, as if they held all the answers in the world. 9 years later, I stood in my home office, looking out over my 6-acre estate in Ridgewood, New Jersey, when my security team called me. An older couple was waiting at the gate. They said they were my parents. For the first time in almost a decade, I smiled. I thought about Gerald and Constance Hall and the stupid mistake they had thrown away. I was about to decide if they were even worth a conversation. My name is Phoenix Hall. I was 21 years old when my world fell apart, and now I need to tell you how I built a new one from the ruins. Growing up in Ridgewood, I was never the daughter my father wanted. Gerald Hall owned a mid-sized construction company, and from the day I was born, he made his disappointment clear. He wanted a son. Instead, he got me, so he chose to act like the difference didn't matter. While other girls my age were learning how to braid hair and choose prom dresses, I was learning how to change tires in our garage. I spent my summers carrying materials at his construction sites and playing softball. Deep down, I wanted to take dance classes, but my father already had a plan for me. I was going to be the son he never had. I was going to take over whole construction and continue his legacy. The fact that I was a girl was just an inconvenience he decided to ignore. Over time, I learned to ignore it too. I learned to swallow my feelings and become who he wanted me to be. My feelings, to always perform, to always achieve. I studied business at Rutgers because that was what he expected from me. I got straight A's because anything less meant a long lecture about wasted potential. I became a perfectionist, constantly chasing approval that never really came. Looking back now, I realize I could rebuild a carburetor with my eyes closed, but I still can't French braid my hair to save my life. Some education, right? My mother, Constance, was a different kind of problem. She wasn't cruel. She was simply absent in every way that mattered. She moved through our house like a ghost, never arguing with my father, never defending me, never making even the smallest wave. For a long time, I thought she was weak. Later, I understood the truth. She had made her choice years ago, and that choice was comfort over courage. If someone had told me back then that in just 8 months I would lose everything, my family, my future, and the man I thought loved me, all in the same 24 hours, I would have laughed. But life is a cruel sense of timing, and mine was about to run out. That's when I met Tyler Webb. Looking back, I should have known better. Any man whose smile could convince you the sky was green was probably lying about the color of everything else too. But I was 21, and I was desperate to be loved by someone who actually saw me as a woman. So when this handsome 24-year-old pharmaceutical sales rep started talking about our future like it was already written in the stars, I believed every word. Marriage, kids, a house with a white picket fence. After 21 years of being told I wasn't enough, here was someone who made me feel like I was everything. I fell hard. The kind of fall where you don't even realize you've left the ground until it's far too late. Ground until you're already falling straight toward concrete. 8 months into our relationship, I found out I was pregnant. Terrified doesn't even begin to describe how I felt. But Tyler seemed happy. He talked about baby names, nursery colors, and teaching our child how to ride a bike. I allowed myself to believe him. I allowed myself to hope. That was my first mistake. Soon, Tyler started pulling away. He said he was busy with work. He said he had to travel more. I buried my worries deep inside because I needed the fairy tale to be real. I needed at least one part of my life not to end in disappointment. My second mistake was telling my parents. I planned to tell them about my pregnancy at Sunday dinner. Tyler was supposed to be there with me, but he canceled at the last minute. He said it was a work emergency. So I sat there alone, across from Gerald and Constance Hall, pushing my food around my plate, and finally said the words that changed everything. My hands turned ice cold under the table. My heartbeat climbed into my throat, pounding so loudly I was sure they could hear it across the dining room. My father's face changed in stages. First confusion, then disbelief, then something cold and hard settled into his features, something I had never seen in all my 21 years. My mother froze. Her fork stopped halfway to her mouth, a statue dressed in pearls and silence. Gerald didn't yell. That would have been easier. Instead, he spoke in a quiet, controlled voice that was somehow worse than screaming. He talked about his plans for me, about how I was meant to take over the company, about how an unmarried, pregnant daughter would ruin his reputation in the business world, about how he had spent 21 years trying to shape me into something useful. And this, he said, was how I repaid him. Then the silence shattered. He stood up so fast that his chair flew backward and slammed into the hardwood floor. The noise made me flinch like a gunshot. And then he said words I will carry with me for the rest of my life. He said I was nothing but a stupid mistake from his past. He said he should have tried again for a son instead of wasting his time on me. He told me to take my pregnancy and get out of his house. I looked at my mother. I begged her with my eyes to say something, anything, to defend me just once. She didn't move. She just stared at her mashed potatoes like they were the most interesting thing she had ever seen. Gerald gave me 1 hour. With shaking hands, I packed 2 suitcases. 21 years of my life stuffed into whatever would fit. My mother never came to my room. She didn't help. She didn't say goodbye. I heard the television turn on downstairs, some cheerful game show playing while I erased myself from my childhood home. I walked out the front door and never looked back. Sitting in my car, I called Tyler. No answer. I called again. Straight to voicemail. I sent him a message with trembling fingers, telling him my father had kicked me out, telling him I needed him. I waited for 3 hours. 3 long hours sitting alone in a dark parking lot, staring at my phone like it held my entire future. I prayed the fairy tale would survive just a little longer. Then his message finally came through, and whatever was left of my naive heart shattered into pieces so small, I wasn't sure I would ever find them all again. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, please hit the subscribe button. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every single comment, and they truly mean the world to me. Thank you so much for your support. Now, where were we? Right. Tyler's message was only 6 words. That was all he gave me. After 8 months, after all the promises, after talking about our future, our baby, and forever, just 6 words glowing on my phone in a dark parking lot. He said he couldn't do this. He said he was sorry. And he told me not to contact him again. I didn't listen. Of course I didn't. I called him at least 40 times that night. Every call went straight to voicemail, until suddenly the number stopped connecting at all. He had blocked me. The man who talked about naming our children had blocked me like I was a stranger. The next morning, I drove to his apartment. I needed answers. I needed to look him in the eye and understand how someone could turn from Prince Charming into a ghost overnight. A woman opened the door. She was beautiful, well put together, and wearing an engagement ring that caught the morning light like a tiny disco ball of Betrayal. Her name was Lauren, and she had been engaged to Tyler Webb for 2 years. 2 years. While Tyler was whispering promises to me, he was going home to a fiancé who had no idea I existed. I was the other woman in a story I didn't even know I was part of. The nausea I felt had nothing to do with pregnancy anymore. Lauren and I stared at each other in silence. 2 women realizing we had been loving the same lie. Then Tyler stepped into view behind her, and the mask finally fell. There was no charm left, no warmth. He looked at me like I was a problem he needed to get rid of. He told me to handle my problem, and then slammed the door in my face. I should have seen the signs. He always claimed he was traveling for work to exciting places, yet he never came back with a tan or even a single photo. I used to believe every word to think he was just private. Turns out, he was just a professional liar with a frequent flyer account. So there I was, 21 years old, pregnant, disowned, and abandoned, all within 24 hours. I had $847 in my savings account. My father had already called every relative we had, poisoning the well before I could even ask for help. One aunt tried to secretly send me money, but when Gerald found out, he threatened to cut her off completely. Even my mother managed to slip me $500 through a cousin, but when my father discovered it, he punished her by taking away all her credit cards. I found a small room in a boarding house in Newark. It smelled like mildew and broken dreams, but it cost $60 a week, and that was all I could afford. I worked 3 jobs. Mornings at a bakery starting at 4 a.m., covered in flour and pure exhaustion. Afternoons at a dry cleaner, pressing other people's clothes while my own life fell apart. Evenings at a call center, getting yelled at by strangers until 10 at night. I would crawl into my tiny bed, sleep for 5 hours, and do it all over again. My body held on as long as it could. At 6 months pregnant, I collapsed during my shift at the call center. I just dropped between the cubicles like a puppet with its strings cut. I woke up in a hospital bed with a doctor standing over me, telling me I was killing myself and my baby. He said if I didn't slow down, I would lose her. I quit 2 of my jobs. I didn't have a choice. I survived on 1 paycheck, food stamps, and a level of anxiety that should have had its own zip code. My daughter was born in April. I named her Iris, after the flower and the goddess of rainbows, because she was the only color left in my gray world. She entered this life in a delivery room with no family waiting outside, no father pacing the hallways, no grandparents waiting to hold her, just me, exhausted, terrified, and more in love than I had ever been in my life. A nurse asked if my family was coming. I told her they were traveling. That was easier than explaining that my family had thrown me away like yesterday's trash. I held Iris in my arms, this tiny, perfect human who had done nothing wrong except exist. And I made her a promise. I swore she would never, ever know what it felt like to be unwanted. Meanwhile, my father was busy erasing me from existence. He told everyone in Ridgewood that I was troubled, that I made bad choices. He never said anything directly. He didn't have to. He let people's imaginations do the rest. Old family friends crossed the street to avoid me when I came back to the area. Former college classmates stopped replying to my messages. Through a cousin's accidental social media post, I discovered that I had been cropped out of every family photo. 21 years of birthdays, holidays, and graduations, and I no longer existed in any of them. But here's the truth about rock bottom. Once you hit it, there's nowhere left to go but up. That year, I learned how to stretch $12 across 7 days of groceries. I learned 4 to 7 different recipes using rice and beans. To this day, I'm worth millions, and I still can't look at a kidney bean without my eye twitching. Some scars never fully fade. The deepest wound wasn't my father's anger. It was my mother's silence. Constance Hall had watched her only daughter be thrown into the world, pregnant and alone, and she had said nothing. She had done nothing. She chose the path of least resistance. A few months after Iris was born, I wrote my mother a letter. I poured my heart onto the page. I told her granddaughter. I begged her to meet Iris, to be part of her life, to choose love over fear just once. Her reply arrived 2 weeks later. 1 short paragraph. She wrote that my father thought it was best if they all moved on. She said she was sorry. Sorry. That one word felt small, weak, and completely useless. It was worse than silence. At least silence didn't pretend to care. On Iris's first birthday, I threw her a party in our tiny apartment. It was just the 2 of us. I bought a cake from the discount shelf at the grocery store with a dent in the frosting and 1 balloon I found on sale. I was exhausted, broke, and eating cake that tasted more like survival than sweetness. But my daughter smiled at me. It was a big, gummy, joyful smile that knew nothing about absent fathers, cruel grandfathers, or mothers who chose comfort over their children. And in that moment, something changed inside me. I realized I had 2 choices. I could spend my life drowning in resentment, replaying my father's words, letting Gerald Whole live rent-free in my head forever. Or I could build something so big, so successful, and so completely mine that his opinion would no longer matter. I've never been good at drowning. The turning point came from an unexpected place. A tough, widowed, 68-year-old woman named Miriam Castellanos. She ran a struggling property management company and had 0 patience for excuses. I got an entry-level job at her firm when Iris was about 18 months old. I filed paperwork, answered phones, and made coffee that Miriam always complained was too weak. But Miriam noticed things. She noticed that I stayed late without being asked. She noticed that I caught mistakes in contract that everyone else missed. She noticed that I carried the kind of hunger that comes from having nothing and everything to prove about her granddaughter. One day, she called me into her office and asked what I wanted to do with my life. I told her I never wanted to feel powerless again. She nodded, Like that was the only answer that mattered, and she started teaching me everything she knew. Miriam had built her company from nothing after her husband died, leaving her with 3 children and a mountain of debt. She understood survival. She understood what it meant to be underestimated. And she saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself yet. That's when I discovered I had a talent for real estate. Not the flashy, smooth-talking sales kind, but something deeper and more valuable. I could look at a neglected property, a building everyone else had written off, and see exactly what it could become. Where others saw decay, I saw potential. It felt like a superpower. Except instead of a cape, I wore sensible flats and pure determination. My first successful negotiation, if you can call it that, was convincing my landlord not to evict me by offering to personally fix the building's broken mailboxes. I spent an entire weekend with a screwdriver, a YouTube tutorial, and more curse words than I care to admit. But when I finished, I learned something important. I could sell anything to anyone if I truly believed in the value I was offering. That broken mailbox situation became my real business school. I earned my real estate license while working full-time and raising Iris on my own. I studied at 2 in the morning, textbooks spread across my kitchen table, my daughter asleep in the next room. I drank enough coffee to power a small spacecraft. I failed my first practice exam and cried in the bathroom for 20 minutes. Then I wiped my face and studied harder. When I finally passed the licensing exam, I held that certificate in my hands and sobbed. Not from sadness, survivor tears, the kind that come when you realize you might actually make it after all. My first sale was a tiny condo that had been sitting on the market for 8 months. Nobody wanted it. The location was odd, the layout awkward, and it smelled faintly of cats and regret. I staged it myself, using furniture from thrift stores and tricks I'd learned from home improvement shows. I even baked cookies before every showing because I read somewhere that the smell makes people feel at home. Probably manipulation, but delicious manipulation. That condo sold in 3 weeks. My commission was $3,200, more money than I had seen in 2 years of struggling. I remember depositing that check and just staring at my bank balance, watching the numbers change, feeling something I hadn't felt since before my father's words destroyed everything. I felt hope. Miriam promoted me, gave me more listings, and began treating me less like an employee and more like a protege. I absorbed everything she taught me, learning the business inside and out like a sponge that had been dry for decades. When Iris was 3, she asked me why we didn't have a backyard. She had seen one on a TV show and wondered why our apartment only had a parking lot. I knelt down to her level and made a promise. I told her that one day we would have the biggest backyard in all of New Jersey. That night, she drew me a picture, a house way too big, a yard taking up most of the page, and 2 stick figures holding hands. Me and her. I put that drawing in my wallet and have carried it with me every single day since. But success doesn't come without setbacks. I constantly struggled with a voice in my head that sounded exactly like my father. Evsa me thing bigger. That voice reminded me I was just a stupid mistake. Every time I doubted myself, Gerald Hall's words echoed in my mind like a curse I couldn't escape. Miriam noticed. One afternoon, she sat me down and shared her own story of being dismissed and underestimated. Her husband's family had told her she would fail. Business associates had laughed at her. Banks had refused her loans because she was a woman alone. She looked me straight in the eyes and said something I will never forget. The best revenge isn't proving them wrong. The best revenge is forgetting they exist while you build your kingdom. Around this time, Tyler decided to resurface. Because of course he did. He found me on social media when Iris was 4. His messages were full of false concern and carefully phrased questions. He had heard I was doing better. He wanted to reconnect. He claimed it was about discussing Iris's future. What he really meant was that he had heard I wasn't destitute anymore and wanted either to ease his guilt or see if there was money to be had. I screenshot every message, saved them in a folder, and never replied. Let him wonder. Let him wait forever. Here's something funny, though. Lauren, his ex-fiancée, reached out to me around the same time. Apparently, Tyler had eventually cheated on her too, because leopards don't change their spots. They just find new gazelles. She was now happily remarried to a decent man and wanted to apologize for how everything had happened, even though none of it was her fault. We ended up becoming friends, bonded by the shared experience of loving a professional con artist. Life is strange that way. Sometimes the people you should hate every time I reach for become the people who understand you best. Through industry connections, I started hearing whispers about whole construction. My father had overextended during a building boom, taken bad loans with even worse terms, and his company was slowly bleeding out. His pride wouldn't let him admit it. The Constances had to let go of their housekeeper. They stopped taking their annual vacation. Small cracks in the facade that only someone paying attention would notice. I noticed. I didn't feel satisfaction. Not yet. I was too busy building my own empire to waste energy on his crumbling one. By the time Iris started first grade, I had saved $180,000. I had a plan, a reputation, and a future that had nothing to do with Gerald or Constance Hall. I wasn't planning revenge. I was simply too busy for revenge. But if my success happened to shine a light on exactly what they had thrown away, well, that was just good positioning. By the time I was 28, I had learned something important about myself. I wasn't just a survivor. I was a builder. Miriam Castellanos decided to retire. 68 years of working, fighting, and proving everyone wrong had earned her a beach somewhere warm, where nobody knew her name and nobody needed her expertise. Before she left, she sat me down and offered me her entire client list at a price so low it was practically a gift. I tried to argue, tried to pay her what it was actually worth. She just looked at me with those sharp eyes that had seen everything and said this was her investment in the future. She wanted to watch what I would build, and she couldn't do that if I was broke from overpaying her. Then she handed me a bottle of champagne, told me not to open it until I made my first million, and walked out. The door. I still have that bottle. I'm saving it for something even bigger now. I launched Phoenix Rise Properties from a tiny office in Hoboken with one desk, one chair, and more ambition than square footage. The name wasn't subtle, but subtlety had never gotten me anywhere. I was a phoenix. I had burned, and I had risen. Anyone who had a problem with that could take it up with my profit margins. My specialty became finding neglected properties in neighborhoods on the verge of transformation, buildings everyone else dismisses lost causes. I would buy them, restore them with care and intelligence, and sell them for far more than I paid. My first major project was a condemned apartment building in Jersey City, scheduled for demolition. I saw potential where everyone else saw rubble. 18 months and countless sleepless nights later, I converted it into luxury condos that sold out in 6 weeks. That project earned me $1.2 million in profit. I remember sitting in my new office, staring at the numbers, trying to make them feel real. 8 years earlier, I had been eating dented birthday cake in a boarding house, wondering if I could afford diapers. Now I was a millionaire. Not inherited wealth. Not family money. Mine. Every dollar earned through work, determination, and refusing to quit when quitting would have been so much easier. I deliberately kept a low profile during those years. I used my business name on everything, rarely my personal one. No social media presence, no photos in industry publications, no flashy displays of success. My office was in Hoboken, far from Ridgewood and the people who once knew me. Anyone from my old life wouldn't have recognized a confident businesswoman in tailored suits who closed deals worth more than their houses. The transformation from struggling single mother to real estate developer still surprises me sometimes. I went from owning 2 pairs of work pants to having a closet organized by season and occasion. I still keep those original 2 pants, though they are framed in my closet like art. Some people hang diplomas. I hang polyester blend reminders of where I started. Through it all, Iris remained my center, my reason, my North Star. When she was 7, she started asking about grandparents. Her friends at school talk about visiting Grandma's house, being spoiled with cookies and presents, having that special bond grandparents and grandchildren share. Iris wanted to know why she didn't have that. I gave her a simplified version of the truth. I explained that sometimes adults make choices that hurt the people they should love, and my parents had made that choice. I didn't poison her against them. I didn't use her as a weapon for my own pain. I just told her the facts in words a 7-year-old could understand. She thought for a moment, this beautiful girl with my eyes and her own fierce spirit. Then she shrugged and said it was their loss because I was the best mom ever. I cried in the shower that night. Happy tears and sad tears, all mixed together, washing down the drain along with the last remnants of hope that my parents might somehow change. Speaking of change, I should tell you about Russell. Russell Okonkwo was an architect, 34 years old, divorced with a young son, brilliant at his work and patient in a way that felt foreign to me. We met at an industry conference when I was 29. He was presenting on sustainable building design. I was pretending to take notes while actually judging everyone's business cards. He asked me to coffee afterward. I said no. He asked again a month later. I said no again. The third time, 6 months after that, I finally said yes, mostly because his persistence had become impressive enough to deserve a chance. Here's the thing about Tyler Webb. He didn't just break my heart. He broke my ability to trust. For years after him, I couldn't see a man's kindness without searching for a hidden agenda. Every compliment felt like the opening move in a con. Every promise sounded like a lie waiting to reveal itself. I had built walls so high around my heart that I wasn't sure anyone could scale them. Russell didn't try to scale them. He just showed up consistently, respected my boundaries, and proved, through actions, not words, that he was exactly who he appeared to be. It took years, literal years of friendship, slow trust building, and him never once pushing for more than I was ready to give. By the time Iris was 8, Russell and I were officially together. He had to earn his place in my life the hard way, and that's the only way that matters. Meanwhile, I kept tabs on whole construction through public records and industry gossip. Not obsessively, just enough to know that my father's empire was crumbling while mine grew. Gerald had lost 2 major contractor competitors who were younger, hungrier, and more adaptable. He had even taken a second mortgage on my childhood home, the same house he had thrown me out of with such righteous fury. My mother's sister mentioned at a community event that Gerald's pride wouldn't let him admit they were struggling. He was still pretending everything was fine, even while the foundation rotted beneath him that I felt nothing when I heard these things. No satisfaction. No pity, just a distant kind of acknowledgement, like reading about a stranger's misfortune in the newspaper. Then I saw the listing. Thornfield Estate. 6 bedrooms, 4 acres, a historic property in Ridgewood that had been on the market for 2 years because the asking price was ambitious and the renovation needs were significant. It was 3 miles from my parents' house. It was also in one of the best school districts in New Jersey, perfect for Iris as she approached her high school years. The property had incredible bones, and I could already see exactly what it could become. I told myself I was buying it because it was a good investment, because Iris deserved the backyard I had promised her when she was 3, because Ridgewood schools would give her opportunities that mattered. All of that was true, but I would be lying if I said I didn't smile when I signed those papers. Some purchases are practical. Some purchases are poetic. This one was both. We moved into Thornfield Estate 2 weeks before Iris's 9th birthday. I was 30 years old, self-made, successful, beyond anything my 21-year-old self could have imagined. I had a daughter who knew she was loved, a partner who had earned my trust, and a home that belonged entirely to me. I didn't think about my parents. I didn't need to. But Ridgewood is a small town, and secrets have very short lifespans. The whispers started within days of my moving in. Ridgewood isn't a big place. People talk. People notice. And when the disowned daughter of Gerald Hall suddenly appears in a historic estate worth more than most people earn in a lifetime, people definitely talk. I heard the rumors secondhand through Russell, who had heard them from a colleague, who heard them from a neighbor. Did you hear Gerald Hall's daughter is back? The one he kicked out years ago? She's living in Thornfield Estate, the $8 million property. Can you believe it? Before we continue, I need to take a second to say thank you. If this story is hitting home for you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. It truly means everything to me. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. I read every single one. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Now, back to those whispers. The rumors spread through Ridgewood like wildfire through dry grass. Everyone knew, except, apparently, Gerald and Constance Hall. They existed in their own bubble of denial, still pretending their reputation was intact, still believing no one knew about their financial troubles or their discarded daughter. Constance found out first, through her bridge club of all things. A well-meaning friend asked if she was excited about having Phoenix back in town, about having access to her granddaughter. Constance apparently went pale as paper and excused herself early. She told Gerald that night. I can only imagine that conversation. His face when he realized his stupid mistake. The daughter he had thrown away like garbage was now living in a house he could never afford. The daughter he had erased from photographs was now worth more than he would ever be again. Gerald didn't believe it at first. Couldn't believe it. He researched Phoenix Rise properties obsessively from what I heard later. He found the portfolio, the awards, the industry recognition, photographs of me at conferences, shaking hands with mayors and developers, looking nothing like the crying girl he had given 1 hour to pack her life. I imagine his face went through several stages during that research: confusion, denial, recognition, and finally something he probably hadn't felt in years: desperation. It was a Saturday morning when the call came. I was in my home office, reviewing plans for a new development project, drinking coffee and enjoying the quiet. Iris was playing in the garden with Russell's son, their laughter floating through the open window like music. My security team called, very professional, very neutral. They informed me that an older couple was at the main gate. The couple claimed to be my parents and requested entry to the property. My heart stopped. Then it started again, faster than before. I looked out the window at Iris, my daughter, happy and innocent, unaware that the people who had rejected her before she was even born were standing at our gate, waiting to be let in. I told security to inform them I would be there shortly. Then I made them wait 4 to 7 minutes. I would love to tell you it wasn't pettiness, that I genuinely needed that time to compose myself, to prepare what I would say, to settle my nerves. And that was partly true. But I would be lying if I said there wasn't some satisfaction in knowing Gerald Hall was standing outside a gate, waiting for permission to enter, while his daughter took her time deciding if he was even worth the effort. Some things you earn through patience. Other things you earn by making people wait. When I finally walked down to the gate, I saw them clearly for the first time in 9 years. Gerald had aged badly. The stress of financial ruin was written across his face in deep lines and gray skin. He had lost weight, but had never existed. I reminded Constance that she had written me a letter, choosing his comfort over her own grandchild, and that her sorry was not enough then, and would never be enough now. Gerald's facade cracked. He admitted the company was bankrupt. They were about to lose the house. Everything he had built was gone, and he needed help. He actually said those words to me, that I had to help them because they were my parents. I almost laughed. Almost. Because here was the man who had refused to be my father when I needed him, demanding that I be his daughter now that he needed me. He finally saw me as capable, but only because he needed my checkbook. Better late than never, some people might say. Some things are simply too late. I looked at my father for a long moment, really looked at him. This was the man who had shaped my entire childhood with disappointment and demands, who had made me feel like a failure simply for being born the wrong gender, who had thrown me away when I needed him most and expected me to crawl back when he needed me. Then I looked at my mother, the woman who had chosen silence over love, who had watched her only daughter get discarded and done nothing, who had written sorry in a letter as if that single word could bandage a wound that went bone deep. And I smiled, not with cruelty, not with vengeance, not with the satisfaction of watching them suffer. I smiled because I realized, standing there in front of my beautiful home with my daughter's laughter in the background, that I didn't need anything from them anymore. Not their approval, not their regret, not even their acknowledgement of how wrong they had been. I was free. I told Gerald I wasn't going to help him, not because I wanted him to suffer, but because I didn't owe him anything. He had made that clear 9 years ago when he gave me 1 hour to pack my life into suitcases. The debt between us was settled the moment I walked out his door. I told him I had a daughter who had never known what it felt like to be unwanted. That was my legacy, not saving people who threw me away when I was at my lowest. Then I turned to Constance specifically. I told her she could have left him. She could have chosen me. She could have been a mother when it mattered. She didn't. That was her right, her choice to make, and this was mine. Gerald tried anger first. He raised his voice, talked about everything he had done for me growing up, tried to make me feel guilty. It bounced off me like rain off glass. His anger had no power anymore. Then he tried guilt, reminded me they were old, that they had nowhere to go, that I was their only child. I felt nothing. The guilt he was trying to summon had been burned out of me years ago. Finally, he tried something that looked almost like genuine remorse. His voice cracked. His eyes got wet. He said he was sorry, that he had been wrong, that he had made the biggest mistake of his life. Too little, 9 years too late. I told him I hope he found peace, but he wouldn't find it here, not at my gate, not in my home, not in my life. Constance spoke for the first time since they had arrived. Her voice was small, barely above a whisper. She asked if she could at least see Iris just once, just to see her granddaughter. For one moment, my heart wavered. This was my mother, the woman who had braided my hair when I was little before Gerald decided that was too feminine. The woman who had snuck me $500 through a cousin when I had nothing. Then I remembered the letter. I remembered the years of silence, the years of choosing him over me, the years of letting me struggle alone while she preserved her comfortable life. I told her Iris didn't know she existed, and I said keeping it that way was the kindest thing I could give my daughter. Constance's face crumpled. Gerald put his arm around her, still trying to maintain some dignity, still playing the role of protective husband, even though he had protected nothing. They left slowly, like they were hoping I would change my mind. I watched them walk back to their car, a vehicle older than it should have been, showing the kind of wear that come from deferred maintenance and stretched budgets. They drove away. I stood at my gate until their car disappeared around the corner, and I felt lighter with every inch of distance between us. Iris came running up a few minutes later, Russell's son chasing behind her. She asked who those people were. I looked at my daughter, this beautiful, happy, confident girl who knew she was loved every single day of her life, who had never been called a mistake, who had never been made to feel like she wasn't enough. I told her they were nobody important, and I meant it. That evening, Russell came over for dinner. We sat in the garden, watching the kids play, eating food that I had actually paid someone else to cook because I could afford that now, because I had built something from nothing, and I was allowed to enjoy it. Iris showed Russell her latest drawing, our family, our house, our big backyard with trees and flowers and a swing set. 3 figures holding hands, plus Russell's son beside them. A family that had nothing to do with blood and everything to do with choice. I looked at my life, the daughter I had raised alone through the hardest years, the man who had earned my trust through patience and consistency, the home that belonged entirely to me, paid for with money I had made through my own intelligence and effort. Not a single piece of it came from Gerald or Constance Hall. And that's exactly the way it should be. Those who throw away their children don't get to claim their success. I rose from the ashes because I had to. My parents never even tried to strike the match. Thank you so much for watching. More of my most gripping stories are already on your screen. Click one now and don't miss the best part. You will love it. See you in the next.